Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and it is the 2nd of September. I realize I've been doing these live streams since roughly the 2nd of May. So, good morning, Alex. So I have been doing these we're going on 5 months now. So, wow, it's amazing how long I've been doing this, and now it's become part of my morning routine. So this morning we have French press, okay? And it is morning coffee, so I do have the percolator downstairs, which is the drip coffee maker, which is actually starting to act a little weird. But so really, this is actually cup of coffee number 3 today, because it's so good, and it's pumpkin spice and yum. Yes, exactly. It's It is pumpkin. It is definitely a pumpkin spice day. I imagine it might be where you live too, Alex. I don't know if you're getting this cool weather that's come in, but it's now getting to be more autumnal. It's going to get down to like 49 or 50 tonight, which for people in the UK that's like 8 or 9 degrees. It is so nice, and as you can see, I have got the autumnal sweater on. I've got all the autumnal stuff, and I've got the, autumnal today, and drinking pumpkin spice as well. Well, cheers. It is a pumpkin spice kind of day. It's Labor Day here in the USA, and so I have it's also, good morning, Pat. So today's Labor Day. We were just all toasting each other with pumpkin spice. So I don't know what your morning beverage of choice is, but this is what we're drinking down here in the lower 48. It's really it's absolutely a beautiful day, and of course it's a little cloudy out right now. But last night I was actually looking. I woke up at 4:44 actually. I woke up 4:44, and I looked outside, and there's a couple trees outside my window. There's a lot of trees. I live in the country, but coffee for me. Okay, so you're just doing the regular straight up, yeah. Where Alex and I have the pumpkin spice going, because that's one thing. I think if I moved abroad, that's one thing I would miss, is like the whole pumpkin thing, because that's not really a thing in Europe or anywhere else. You don't, not that there aren't other good things, but it's very, but pumpkin beer, pumpkin spice coffee, pumpkin flavored stuff. I guess they do have it now. I remember being in Oxford in the fall and seeing that they had, like, if you went past some of the, like, Costa Coffee and those places, that they actually did buy on Amazon. Well, yes, exactly. And you know what? That is actually what I do now, because weirdly, the stores here don't always even carry it. At least the stores around me. Occasionally I can find, like, you can find like caramel macchiato coffee, or you can find, you can find certain blends, or they get the really expensive ones, like the DD, the Dunkin' Donuts Brent one, and that one's like, they want like $10 for it. And Starbucks, I don't know, I'm kind of not buying things from Starbucks lately for, for reasons, like Project 2025 reasons. But Starbucks usually has a version of something too that sometimes I would buy. They have something, or like the cinnamon coffees and stuff. Oh, good morning, Melissa. So good to see you. And it's funny, because one of the things I was going to talk about this morning, we were just getting into our little fall pumpkin spicy, like, obsession thingy, and how I would miss. That's one thing I would really miss if I go abroad, because they have like a pumpkin like syrup or something, but it's not quite the same. So yes, but Pat is right. Buy it on Amazon. That's the way I do it now. As I get the good stuff. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful morning. The weather's just going to get more and more beautiful this week, which means I'm probably going to be spending more and more time outside trying to get, the house power washed. And yes, cheers. Trying to get house power washed, trying to get the painting done before it gets too cold. and just getting my yard cleaned up, because I've already got leaves everywhere, which is just so nice. I mean, I've got the gold ones, and then I've got the red, like the kind of orange maple tree leaves that are falling down, and so that's already starting, and it's just going to get better. So yeah. So anyways, you can tell I'm totally in the zone for that. There was this article in the Onion that, and I think I've mentioned this before, the Mr. Autumn Man. And it's from years ago. It's probably from over 20 years ago, but the article is still funny, and I end up reposting it like every autumn to my page, because it's the guy, like, he's out in like Massachusetts, and he's got his his Mr. Autumn Man sweater and his scarf and his Starbucks pumpkin spice or whatever, and and he's outside, and and it's just it's funny. It's meant to be satire, but it's funny. I was like, yeah, guilty as charged. So anyway, yesterday we had a really great intuitive development class. And the reason I thought about you, Melissa, is because we actually were talking about auras and reading auras and aura photographs, which I know is something that you do. So we had a really nice discussion about that yesterday. I actually have 5 photographs. One of them was taken by you, and 2 of them were taken with a Kirlian photography machine that was taken back in 1999 and 2000. Oh, yay, yes. And then I had one that was taken at Mount Shasta when I was visiting there with my family. We wanted to go walk in the Lassen Volcanic, which is nearby, like walking around the volcanoes. We talked about that, and so we went to the town of Mount Shasta. Didn't actually climb the mountain. That's probably why I'm still here. Never mind. Forget a fear of heights. All the little portals and things that are supposed to be there. I'm like, yeah, I just completely disappear into some Lemurian landscape and never return. But there's so I had another aura photograph taken there, and then I had one taken in Salem. Speaking of Salem, Massachusetts, went around the time that I quit my job. When I went up there with a friend, and we were just, I was trying to make some decisions, and it was just interesting because I was showing people the different gradients, like what emotional state I was in when each of these photos were taken, and then right up to the one that you had taken, Melissa, a couple years ago when you were doing your thing at the Rock Box, and so we were looking at the way in which the way the imaging changes too, because the Kirlian gives you a different type of an image than than the ones than the machine that you use, which could kind of actually, it's almost like it has almost a circular thing. It almost shows the energy coming in and going out. It kind of does that kind of a thing, rather than just a big, burst of light that's around you. So, yeah, so that was fun. And then we actually experimented with everybody being able to see, and checking out each other's auras. Everybody standing against the white background, checking out each other's auras. So anyway, we had fun, and next week we are talking about spirit guides and contacting spirit guides, and if you don't know, trying to get the name of your spirit guide and stuff like that. So that's going to be next week's class for intuitive development. Some people already have spirit guides, but in which case then it's just an opportunity to chit-chat. So anyway, and speaking of spirit guides, I did have a couple of Azrael messages from yesterday. They're kind of there's kind of this continuing background narrative that's been going on, and okay, so I want to try to see if I can give the summary version of this rather than, because I'm reading through. This is my big book, by the way. This is my big book of see, doesn't it fit? It's got the big book, and then the old house. And it's all, it's just the autumn vibes are just crazy. But in any case, this is my big book, angelic stuff. And that's where I write any kind of work, communications, experimentation with different things, different types of scrying and stuff like that would all go into this book. And I even have some of oh, I didn't know that was in there. Even some of Lon Milo Duquette's notes on it and stuff like that from his book. But I have all this here. And okay, so we talked about, people remember who were here, and who were here on the 19th, and remember that around that full moon, I had that massive experience where I was like in pain all night, and I was kind of like reliving my 12th house stuff and all that. And my connection to whatever seems to be going on. We were talking about what's going on in the celestial realm and how that affects what goes on here. Now, when we talk about the celestial realm, that's one realm. It's not like that's the entirety of everything else that's out there. It's just that this is that particular angelic realm, which again, for years I never worked in, and now I seem to be fully enmeshed. So okay, so one of the things that came out of that, and I talked about it a little bit on the Catonia live stream too a couple weeks ago, was that there was basically this idea, and it's funny because this came out, somebody told me that this had come out of the script from Supernatural even, but I've never seen that show, but what came up was the idea that Metatron has sort of been writing the script, and he's writing the script based on information from the Demiurge. And so it's almost giving me kind of this Gnostic view of things that suggests that the idea that there is a creator associated with this world that is lopsided, that is one-sided, and is basically that our narrative has been very lopsided instead of very balanced, very, very masculine tilted. And when I say that, I don't mean just tilted towards men or favoritism of men, which it can manifest as, but more just even our whole way of experiencing the world as being very masculine. So, again, we have wonderful faculties of rationality and stuff like that, and thinking and analyzing, but to a point where those faculties have eclipsed, like they've actually literally cut us off from the world. And we're always living in fear of the future and always trying to analyze and always trying to plan. And that's actually part of the theme of today, because one of the thing that came up 3 times is this morning was compromise. Like don't compromise your need to take a time out. Don't compromise your need to, even in the middle, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all these things I'm doing. I'm trying to get the school started. I have this Kickstarter up, not Kickstarter, GoFundMe for it. I have I have to put up, I have to get a website together. Even though that's part of what I'm trying to fund, I need to get something together so that people can start registering for courses, because they begin in October. I'm beginning, tomorrow my semester begins at Montclair State. And I mean, I'm not driving there, thankfully. I'm doing it all remotely. But still, I'm going to have students, I'm going to have student questions, I'm going to have all this kind of stuff. I still have to get my tarot videos up. Those are going to be late again this week because, I've had a lot of stuff going on this weekend. And so there's just so much going on. So you feel like I need to have some kind of a plan. And basically what I'm kind of being told is no, just kind of go with the flow and see how everything gets done. But anyway, let me just finish what he had said here. So, okay, so he's talking about the idea that whatever happened on the 19th was some kind of a reckoning. So there's this idea that this kind of narrative that we've had in the world that has been split is not something that can go on anymore. Like that's got to end. Like the rebalancing has to take place. And so there needs to be this, that's why there's all this kind of pushback of what we call the feminine. And when we say that, I mean, yes, this can have to do with women, women's rights and women's bodies, like on a purely social level. But on a bigger level, it just has to do with allowing ourselves to really, really, really connect with nature, which a lot of us don't do. And not because we're bad people and don't connect with nature, but just more because we're just taught not to. That's not how we're wired. So it's almost like changing the wiring here, saying, no, being in a space more where you allow things to just flow naturally instead of trying to control it all the time. Because that narrative is very, very much about control. When you have these, that is the negative side of these narratives, is that they become very much about control, controlling the environment. Even spiritual discussions are about, I have to control my thoughts, I have to this, I have to that. It's about yielding. Yielding is more of what the feminine, that yin energy is more about yielding and fluid, allowing oneself to flow in where they are. So, and as he had pointed out, he was talking about the Gnostic idea of the aeons, the pairings of that come together to create. So the emanations from whatever source is, they emanate in pairs. And that's how things are created. But that the way that, the narrative for this world is that there was something created that was one-sided. And that was a mistake, because now we all think of everything. We think of everything in terms of even the people who originally talked about the demiurge, the Gnostics. I was talking with Susie Groff the other day, and we were talking about the Gnostics and connection to a novel she's writing, and even reading about their concept of the demiurge it's like the idea that it created this world that was, like, in other words, saying it was another version of the Earth is bad, and it's like, no, the Earth is not bad, but there's this narrative, but the narrative that goes with it is definitely very, very lopsided. And but what he's saying is that, so there have been certain, he's saying there's four. He says there's four, what he calls the four divided creatures is what he calls them. And so these four divided creatures, which are referring to angels, basically are kind of left that realm and have kind of been sent more to this realm, more to figure out, more to, because they seem to think that the narrative they have created is still the right one. They're divided about, they're still divided. They still think that, yes, well, this world is very split, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's like, no, this has actually been very, very harmful to a lot of people. So it's about rebalancing that narrative. However, what he said to me is you've got to be careful, because a lot of people who are receiving messages right now, or receiving angel messages, maybe receiving it from those sources. And I talked a little bit about how, I think it was Amanda Ellis channeling Metatron, and getting this idea of censorship, being censored. And it's like, yeah, well, Metatron is being censored because the narrative he created is not, it's a bogus narrative. And it's like, no, we're not, that's not the story, because the story that's told there is the story that ends up here. And so it literally, it's kind of like an as above, so below situation. So the narrative is changing, but there's a lot of pushback against that. And he said, so you're going to be getting a lot of messages that are very fearful, a lot of messages about, there's going to be a terrible war coming and everything's going to fall apart and it's going to be horrible. And he's like, you don't want to listen to any of those messages. He's like, they're just, he says, because some of the gatekeepers of those messages between the worlds are still kind of, they're not allowing the correct messages to come through. He said, so you need to make sure that you are reiterating that, this is not a time when people have to be, the idea that somehow all of the things that kind of threaten to crush that sense of community, to kind of leave us in this kind of very fearful, needing a big daddy to control everything kind of energy, is like that's our inevitable destiny. And he's saying, no, it's not. That's not what's going to happen. But there's still an element here that's trying to keep people very afraid. So he's basically saying, you've got to keep telling people not to be afraid. Okay, so that's really kind of what, like, they feel. It's interesting because he had said, what was it? I'll read this. Tibble Brinzi Gizyak, Geneta Hamiparm Baltum Gonobabaj. So the truth of the feminine is like an earthquake for them. And it says, he always talks about them running south, like running south and thinking that they can get away with things, and that because they're on the earth plane, that they can just keep people ignorant of what the shift actually is. And also talking through people who normally receive these kinds of messages. And he says, no, you've got to understand, he's being very vigilant about, no, this is changing. Make sure people understand this is changing. Keep on the track of change. And that's interesting. All girls pull it gono. I'll sting those of divided faith. And he doesn't mean people. I think what he means is more any kind of creatures like himself. That has what he just keeps calling them the divided ones. And yeah, that does make sense, because if the idea is, no, we're not talking about division, we're talking about coming together, then that does make a tremendous amount of sense. So so anyway, so those messages came through today. And I'm going to actually create another page on transitionlifecoaching.net. I think I want to kind of put the Azrael messages together there so people can kind of see what they are and that they can be shared from there. Because there's videos, and I can do videos, and of course I do have another channeling that I have to edit and put up. But basically he's trying to say, get this out in as many ways as you can. Makes me wonder if Azrael could be indirectly referring to Ingress and Pluto back to Capricorn. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Alex, because I did ask him about that. Because I told him, I said, what you're saying does sound remarkably like the astrology. And he said, yeah, well, astrology is a celestial phenomenon, he says, and it affects us as well as it affects the earth. So yeah, it does, that what's going on celestially it is reflecting that. He's saying it is reflecting something that's going on. But it's a matter of there's an attempt to change the energy and to change the current, and that makes sense. Yeah, and it absolutely yes, because that was the other question I asked him. I said, this really sounds like that backwards Uranus and Taurus. This sounds like that backwards Pluto and Capricorn. And he said yes, it's absolutely connected to that, and that's why at this time this is coming up. We're seeing that shift. Remember, the full moon when all this happened was in Aquarius, okay, which is kind of the direction that Pluto is heading eventually after November. And November, like, I'm trying to remember exactly when it goes direct again. I keep seeing a lot around November, but yeah, I think it's in November that Pluto starts moving back towards Aquarius. And then we'll be in Aquarius for, 40 years or something? It's a really long transit, 30 or 40 years, something like that. So yeah, so we're definitely seeing that. But yeah, so I mean, I guess what he's saying is good news is that the narrative is definitely changing. And to me, it's not a narrative when you have men who think that this is, or people who think that this is now like some kind of anti-men thing. It's not saying that the feminine is going to regain its rightful place. It's the same thing of people who saying that people who are what we call minorities in culture, okay? Whether it be people who are not from the white race, or people who are not from whoever dominates the society, okay? That those people getting equality and equal rights is somehow going to disenfranchise those who now have those rights or are in control. And it's like, no, that's literally not what happens. It's not like, okay, women are going to take over now and beat the heck out of men. Like that's not what any of this is about. It's about finding that balance again. It's about saying, okay, men, moving into a narrative where they're allowed to have feelings. Women being able to, be kind of respected in their own right instead of being treated like second-class citizens who are just there to have kids. And again, that's not a slight on anybody who chooses to have kids. It's not saying, oh, that's going to get rid of families and so forth. It has nothing to do with that. It's just, but there's a lot of people who don't choose that. And right now, there's still this perception, just like, there's not pay equality. There's not, there's a lot of fighting over women's bodies. In fact, I saw something today. I think April Shaley posted it on April's Arcana. She was saying that I think it was Billy Sunday who said that the fight, something like to the effect of the fight of nations is often over the bodies of women. That there's a lot that hinges on that, and they were pointing out the fact that the economics of when you have cultures that decide that women's bodily autonomy has to be compromised, that actually is bad for the society. It's the best societies that are the most prosperous and the most are the ones where there's adequate family planning and so forth, and where people have the choices. And by the way, like if you look at the Nordic societies, those are also the societies where when people do choose to have children, like they get a year off and their spouse gets a year off because, hey, imagine that, dad's involved in this too. It's a whole different way of thinking about it. Education is provided, and oftentimes everything, there's a lot of things that are free and that are provided in these kind of societies, which we call socialist. But again, socialism is not, it's not National Socialism. It's not what we saw in Germany in World War II. Although any political system, when pushed too far, can become something negative. But when you see it kind of playing out that way, it's more about the idea that, hey, we're all humans and living human lives, and if what you really want is to see more families and more things, then you have to make conditions where that is a viable alternative. People don't want to have kids if they're, it's going to compromise their health insurance and they're not going to be able to have enough money to pay for them or to have things or to give them anything or to even be able to feed them in some cases. People want to want the right to be able to say, hey, if I'm gonna have a child, I want to have a child who's that is going to grow up in an environment where they're wanted, they're cared for, they're loved. Because a lot of the damage that we have comes out of societies where that doesn't happen, and even so so people have a right to kind of to plan in that way. And then and you don't want to make this all about it's still a model that's very, very archaic. And it's a model that needs to shift. It needs to change because that's not the space that we're living in at this point. So yeah, so there's definitely an assurance of that. But part of that shift is what had come up today, because again, I woke up this morning and I'm like, oh, I got to get my podcast video together because it's Monday and doesn't feel like Monday because it's Labor Day. But I know that I'm going to my sister's house later today, so I have to be ready for that. The podcast is done and has already been posted to Patreon, so I need to post it to the general public. But yeah, I got to get all that stuff up this morning. I still have readings to get done, to be posted either tonight or tomorrow for Libra through Pisces, and I've got to get working on the website for the school, and I got to be checking in on my students. So there's a lot that I have to be doing. And normally Monday, Tuesday are my days off, but and literally what I keep getting is like, no, take the day off. Take the day off. Don't. But I said, but it's not. But the message kept coming up, not just for me. It's kind of this. I think a lot of us right now, where with all the change that's going on, we're kind of scrambling to find something to fill, to fill the new space. Like as we have, as our lives are changing, okay, and as we're moving into a new space, because I think all of us are. There's different things that are happening, and yes, certainly we have like certain responsibilities and things that we need to deal with. So we realize that doesn't go away, but it's more about flowing with what's going on in the moment and not over planning. Like if you're going to make a plan, it's Labor Day, you deserve a day off. Thank you. Yeah, it's probably going to largely be a day off. Because and even over the last couple of days, there's just been things I'm like, well, okay, I have an hour before this, I should do that. And it's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that in the hour before this. I'm going to chill out a little bit. Because that is actually part of the old way of thinking. It's that, the idea that you have to, it's like the slave driver thing. Like you have to be productive all the time. You have to use every extra second that you have to fill it in with some aspect of productivity. But again, it goes back to what I've said about empty space. I feel like right now things are kind of in transition and we're like, okay, well, I don't really know what comes next. It's like, okay, well, that's the space in which you want to sit, because that's the point at which you can hear what the new direction is going to be. You go about your day-to-day business, but you allow that to come in rather than filling your head with what I have to do tomorrow. What about this? What about this? I got to project this. I got to deal with that. Just kind of, there just seems to be a real push lately to really stay in the present. I do have a couple of decks today. I have the good old Rider-Waite, the traditional, and I also brought these guys back. Let's see what pops out for us today. Yeah, okay, it's interesting. We have the Seven of Wands and the King of Wands, right? So what do we have here? I mean, Seven of Wands is this determination to fight, to hold our position, right? We feel like we're fighting against all of this all of the time. And the King of Wands is somebody who's very determined to meet their agenda. I mean, they're like, this is what I'm going to accomplish, and I'm determined to do it. So we have a lot of this determination. But this is interesting. Okay, so our next card here is we see the Five of Pentacles, though, but there's kind of a poverty here. Now it's quite possible that some people are pushing for things for financial reasons, or feeling that there's not enough financially that they need to do. But there's also a different kind of poverty too, and that can be a poverty of connection. It can be a way in which we feel alone and unsupported when that kind of card comes up. And so, with Knight of Swords, we may rush around and say, I've got to get, I have to do all the things, right? I have to do all the things in order to rectify this situation. But we've got the Eight of Cups here, right? This is this card of just walking away from the thing. I mean, this is usually walking away. You've got 8 upright cups here. And so this is often just walking away from from something that has served us. I feel like this is more walking away from what's familiar, from the cups we drank from before. The things that were the ways of doing things that were comfortable, whether they were always the best way to do things or not. There's this, it's beneficial, something that may have served a purpose at a particular time, but doesn't. And as I've often noted with this card, you see the little moon up here, right? The little face here. Actually, what you're looking at is the sun and the moon. You're looking at an eclipse. That's what you're looking at on this card. A lot of people miss that because if you see, there's like two planetary bodies here, right? Or just two. The sun really is technically a star, right? But there's two bodies here. And it's and we do have an eclipse now. Now this is interesting. I've not heard Steve Judd talk about this, but somebody is saying that the next full moon is actually an eclipse, and I have to check whether that's accurate or not. Whether if it's not, certainly I know that between now and November there's like another eclipse season that's coming in. So whether it's this next full moon or not, I have to double check the ephemeris and see what that says. But yeah, but there's this idea of this eclipse. The eclipse energies bring revolutions. They change things. They change everything. And of course, we had that set of very powerful eclipses in March and April. We have a solar eclipse in Libra on October 2nd. Thank you. Okay. And but there should be a lunar eclipse before that. Usually they come in pairs, or because I was trying to think, because last time, the lunar eclipse came first, and then it's followed by a solar eclipse. So I think the lunar eclipse might well be with this next full moon, because that would be the next new moon. So okay, so thank you. Yeah, that would make sense, because so we're moving into these other eclipses, and eclipses, like when I pull out my Black Moon astrology cards, you will only see that those are cards of like revolution and sudden change. So so when we move into a space where things change suddenly, again, the old way of doing things isn't going to cut it. So we want to be open to whatever the new way is. Now, a drastic example of this, and again, I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen here, but let's just pretend you had a system where all you're doing is working just to acquire money, right? We just want to have that. Right now, it's not even so much about having the physical pieces of paper that stand for things. It's more about even just having a number in a computer somewhere. You know, we log into our banking app and it says, look, this is how many dollars it says that you have. And, the joke is almost like, well, what if people just added dollars to that? Is that real? Is it not real? So there's the idea of that reality of money, right? But the bottom line is, if you had a situation where an entire the whole idea of money just collapsed, like it literally had no meaning anywhere, and you invested that, it was like Alan Watts said. He says, well, you can't eat money. You can't take all those pieces of paper and eat them if you don't have, there's the idea of shifting focus on what abundance means and on what you value, okay? And again, I'm not suggesting that there's any great economic collapse there. I mean, there's have been some people who have predicted things like that. But I think more is that we're going to be doing, what I have heard is that with the astrological changes, that in the future, the way we do economics as societies is going to be different, okay? And that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's more like I think Steve Judd was saying all these countries are in debt right now, and it's like, okay, at what point are we going to all stop living on credit, and start really, having this real sense of having something that's abundance or something of value that allows us to live and allows us to live our lives. So we get very attached to certain things, and oftentimes from the time we are Pisces lunar eclipse, Tuesday, September 17th. Great, thank you. So we've got one in Pisces and one in Libra. Okay. And a Pisces lunar eclipse. That's going to be intense, especially with Mars moving into Cancer, which is the idea that you've got all this stuff going on in water signs and all these emotional places. And actually, that Pisces lunar eclipse should actually reveal a whole lot. That should be people taking my intuitive development class. I mean, this seems like a time when intuition, we're going to get very sudden openings up, or people who have been living in a fog or a dream space. I feel like that's going to be an opportunity to wake things up with a Pisces lunar eclipse, because Pisces has to do with both. It has to do with deep intuition in what it teaches us, but also the way in which we can be taken in by illusions. She says, yay! Yay, finally, right? We want to be out of the fog. Okay, so moving on with this reading that I'm doing. So we have this eclipse energy here, this walking away from the past, and moving into a space not only of celebration, but of being with others. Remember, we've been talking a lot about community and sharing and being together, right? This idea of celebrating. And that's funny, I literally just said that, and what's the card that comes up here? We're talking about Pisces lunar eclipse. This is the card of trying to figure out and sort out what's real from what's not real. Okay, trying to sort out which of these options represents a real opportunity and which one is just a phantasm, right? Which one is, a hallucination of the mind. But our outcome here is the Ten of Pentacles, okay? So Ten of Pentacles, I mean, how great is that? I mean, that is, well, first of all, that's legacy, that's family, that's coming together, that's community. And it's also, I mean, this is abundance. This is the culmination of the Pentacles suit. I mean, this is, in terms of staying away from court cards, but this is the 10. This is saying, okay, having real prosperity, having real abundance, okay? Really connecting in with something. And Ten of Pentacles also has to do with legacy, with focusing on what is it that we are leaving for other people. Because I feel like that's where we're all being directed to. And yeah, to the point of Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, we don't want to be moving into this. A lot of times we tend to be so focused on our bank accounts. And again, understandably so. I'm not saying everybody just forget everything, sell everything and go move in the street. I mean, I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is that that becomes such a primary focus that we end up cheating ourselves of the other things. And it's almost like, no, we're going to be moving into a new space where economically we can have what we need, and also be able to do what we love. Like, I feel like that's the direction that we're moving in. And that's because I feel like all the clients who I advise, I feel like that's kind of the message I always get for them, is especially people who have who are changing careers or have had certain things happen in their lives where like, for example, if somebody has been divorced and then they suddenly, the judge makes a change and they don't get alimony anymore, or something like that, where then they say, well, now what am I going to do? And it's like, okay, or people who've had their kids leave home, or things, certain things that happen where finally it's like, okay, my life is going to be very, very different now. What am I going to do? And so that's the gap, that's the space. And what the message is just don't go back and do the thing you did before. That's the thing that we always kind of just want to go back and do the thing we did before. The strong message is don't do that. Take some time. And I've known several people who have either left jobs or have been laid off, left jobs, whatever. And it's kind of like, take a little space to make sure you're going where you want to go. That it's going to be the thing that you want to do. The thing that makes you, that where your personal happiness, satisfaction, and feeling of connection, and feeling that you are offering the gift that you have, is part of the equation. Okay, part of what you're sorting out here. I feel like everybody I'm talking to has been kind of pushed into that space. Now, some people want to go into that space, some people don't. But right now, yeah, this is something that that we're being moved towards. Yeah, I mean, moving out of this Eight of Swords space. Eight of Swords is where we have ourselves mentally tied up in knots. And then that guilt, the calling, yes. Right, actually, yeah, like the idea of vocation, right? Vocari, that's a Latin word for to call, that's your calling. What are you called to do? And with this guilt card here, I mean, a lot of times it's that we feel, if we are not doing it the old way, we feel guilty. I should be worried about having a multi-million dollar 401k. I should be worried about, if I have a choice, I should be taking the thing that's going to give me the maximum amount of money, even if it ruins my life and I hate it. I should be focused on, you know what I mean? Like, we all kind of have this ideas, and we get ourselves, and then when we think we want to make the decision towards what's more authentic to us, we start to feel guilt. We're like, oh, but now that's like me just being childish and running away from my responsibility. That's why my crown won't shut. Yeah, there you go. Because we were talking about how she has trouble closing her crown chakra. And yeah, because somebody's trying to tell you, right, they're trying to show you what the right, that's what we've kind of gotten. Like, they're trying to show you the right way to go. Now, the inner feeling of which we're unaware, I mean, slowing down. That's really what I'm just talking about. Slowing down. Slow down, because when we're running around too fast to try to do it, we forget. And good morning. So yeah, and the external feeling of which we're aware, here's the tower, right? You're right, Uranus energy, thunderbolt, okay? Slow down. This is going on right now. Don't get yourself tied up in your head, okay? First line right here. So our advice card is the Nine of Swords. This is the Sorrow card. And, okay, so in this deck, this is about releasing sorrow, okay? This is about that space where we allow ourselves to pass through sorrow, and that kind of takes us to a place of enlightenment. So it goes back to what I've said about don't suppress your emotions and tell yourself, I have to be positive. Whatever you go through, you move through it. Because moving through it takes you to that rebirth. It takes you to that other space, okay? But Nine of Swords also, in this deck, Nine of Swords has to do with the things that we torment ourselves with. It's really, the Eight and Nine of Swords kind of go together. And actually, I did a whole thing on the Age of Aquarius, and I was talking about Mars and Jupiter in Gemini, which is where they had been, and how that really is represented. The correspondence is the Eight and Nine of Swords. It's that energy that says, that keeps us in this space where we're constantly worried about the future and constantly worried that what we're going to do is not going to succeed, that we're going to fail, or that, if we don't do it the traditional, tried and true way, that we're doing it wrong. Okay? We worry that we've made the right decision, but you've got the maturity card as the outcome. This is the Ace of Pentacles. Okay? The Ace of Pentacles says, no, it's time for something new. It's time to build your security on something new. Okay? So how does this feel for a lot of people? I mean, it's not saying, this is not the whole idea of, well, give everything up and now live in poverty. Like, this is not what this is saying. This is saying that there's other ways to have the abundance that you need, to have the money that you need, to have the funds, to have the life that you want. You don't have to follow a particular script to get there. But this does require us to think outside the box a little bit. And the thing is, but not, actually, I'm going to correct myself, not to keep thinking. Not to keep thinking. Just to give yourself some space to just be where you are, to enjoy where you are. Because what you'll find is that if you just kind of let go of trying to, I've got to figure this out, when you let go of that energy, it flows in. It comes to you. It comes to you, okay? And this is also why I think there's this strong emphasis now on the feminine, contacting your intuitive knowing, contacting your way of knowing that's not about you dissecting and analyzing to death and everything to death in your head. I mean, eventually that has a role. It's not that at some point, once the ideas come through, okay, to make them manifest, yes, that's where you use your rational mind to kind of organize and say, well, okay, well, I need to do this step and this step. But it's not like and you don't have to do them all at the same time. That's the thing. We get an idea and we want to rush and we're like, okay, I got to do everything today. And you don't. Slowing down, that's a lot of the Saturn energy too. Saturn is slow and steady, wins the race, you just take your time. But a lot of times we feel we don't have time. We have to hurry up and get it done. And the thing is, it's saying if you go with the flow, everything ends up where it needs to be. I will point back again to the time that I was, the times when I would do the program for my guru. And the first time I had met her, the first time people meet her, it's like an absolutely blissful experience. Once they're initiated into mantra and so forth, it's just, it's amazing. It's like, if nothing else convinces you of the reality of that, or the fact that this is not all there is, that there's a bigger picture, that's an experience that'll do it. But that's what starts us on the path. And then the path starts to become difficult because we have to gradually, it's that Eight of Cups, you have to gradually drop and let go all of those things of the past that are going to keep you from moving into that future. And my friend Martha and I used to do we used to run the flower shop on those programs. Or we didn't run it, but we would be the ones who'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to the city and go to the flower district and get flowers and, and then meet up with the ashram people and get things sorted and, get the stamp, everything set up. We would do all of that work. And inevitably we would come in the night before and do it, and stay in a hotel. But inevitably when we were rushing around trying to do all that stuff, things would go wrong. Like we'd have worked all day and ready to go to the hotel, and they'd be like, "Oh, your room's not going to be ready for another 3 hours," or "Oh, this is going to happen." And so we're kind of wandering around, trying to, trying to get things sorted, and then thinking, "Oh, okay, well, this is going to work out," but then find out, "Oh, this thing that you thought you were going to have wasn't there," and the frustration that would build. And Martha used to stand there and go, "Okay, this is just a test of the AMA broadcast system." She would just stand there and do that because the idea was just kind of like, okay, life is full of obstacles, and we can't just sit there and say, "Oh, well, there's obstacles, so I can't do anything." And it's like, well, yeah, but you go with the flow of what's there. And if you're stopped, sometimes the answer is, okay, well, you know what? Just stop. And of course it's hard in those programs because then people come over and yell at you going, "Why did you stop? You need to get this thing done." And it's like, well, or those moments in life where, which again, I don't want to repeat all my stories, but in the past, when I had those situations where one thing after another just completely trashed work I had done for months. And really you got to a point where all you could do was just laugh and just be like, okay, it's time to, like, I think, like with my master's thesis, the whole fiasco around that, I was like, it's time to go out for ice cream. I just, I'm done making myself crazy about it. I'm done. But sometimes we have to be pushed to that point of the thunderstorm, of the tower, until finally it's like, all right, you know what? I give up. And then things do come together. Things do get done. That's the point. They get done. They just don't get done in the way that you thought they were going to get done. So, so there's a lot of energy around here around yielding control. That may be some of the lessons that we have with this Pluto retrograde in Capricorn, because we're revisiting those spaces that have to do with doing things that way. That's not the way we're going to be doing things going forward. It's not the way society at large. It's still in the process of changing. So I think it's saying don't lose heart, because we're in the process of changing and you are going to see the benefits of that. So anyway, a little slightly past time here. So thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will be here again tomorrow morning. It's, I'm here every morning, unless either I'm sick or I have somewhere else to be at, before 7 a.m., which does happen. So all of you have a great Monday. If you're here in the U.S. and you're celebrating Labor Day, I hope you're, I don't know if you're doing picnics or whatever. Oh, you're welcome, Melissa. And thanks. Oh, have a great day. You're welcome. And, good to see your lovely face again. Yes. And I'm looking forward to seeing yours next week, because I know we're doing that, thing together at Mount Olive Library. So I'm looking forward to that, you, me, and Jenny. All right, everybody have a wonderful beginning to your September here, and the day off if you have it, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you. You too, Pat. I'll be seeing you very soon too. Take care.